everyone. I'm Allison Hartman. I work for the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, and as a part of my role, I manage the Schuylkill Action Network along with Marguerite here. Today we're going to be talking about greening our schools, stormwater solutions for the Schuylkill.
Hi everyone, I'm Samantha. I'm with Rippled Waters Engineering. I'm part of the design team for these projects. So you'll get to hear a little collaboration on back in the engineering world of it and also the grant side.
So to start, let's give a little bit of background on the Schuylkill Action Network. The Schuylkill River watershed covers almost 2,000 square miles, and the river provides drinking water for almost 2 million people. In 2003, the Philadelphia Water Department completed a source water assessment to identify threats in the Schuylkill River watershed. Because the vast majority of the watershed exists outside of the city of Philadelphia's jurisdictional boundaries, the Philadelphia Water Department knew that it needed to rely on upstream partners to address any threats that were found in this assessment. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the Philadelphia Water Department, and the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary came together and the Schuylkill Action Network was born. Now, the Schuylkill Action Network, or SAN as we typically call it, has over 1,300 members from more than 300 organizations working in 6 different work groups, all working together to protect water quality in the Schuylkill River watershed. For this particular project, which we call Schuylkill Action Students, we had several different partners to work together with. So the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary and Rippled Waters Engineering are the 2 primary partners on this. The Partnership for the Delaware Estuary houses the Schuylkill Action Network, and we are the ones who do the grant management for this. Rippled Waters Engineering is the group we have contracted with to do the on-the-grounds work and the surveying work. The funding primarily comes from NOAA, from Pennsylvania Coastal Resources Management, and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. We did have 3 on-the-grounds partners, the Montgomery County Conservation District, Berks Nature, and Green Valley's Watershed Association, and I'll talk a little bit more about their role later. So first, let's talk about the history of Schuylkill Action Students. This is a program that's been going on for a good long while. This program helps schools within the Schuylkill River watershed design and implement green stormwater infrastructure on their campuses. SAN helps schools identify problem areas that could be improved through green stormwater infrastructure, obtain funding for the plans, install the green stormwater infrastructure, and educate the students in the importance of stormwater mitigation. To date, 28 projects have been implemented across the watershed. Up until this point, the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary and SAN partners have worked with schools one at a time to identify opportunities for non-point source pollution reduction and improved stormwater management on their school campuses. While this has been an effective model to build the program, we realized that there is greater efficiency in conducting outreach and project design at a larger scale to develop a more comprehensive list of projects ready for implementation when funding is available. And what I have pictured here is the before and after of a rain garden planting at the Christopher Dock High School. This is one of the previous projects that the Schuylkill Action Network did through Schuylkill Action Students, and this was about a year later that you can see the photos here. So this grant specifically, often grants have restrictions on how money can be used or the timeline in which a project must be completed. When working with schools, there are sometimes more roadblocks than using other partners, and therefore it can be difficult to gauge interest, create buy-in, make plans, and execute a project all within the time frame of one grant. For this project, we decided to try something a little bit different than other rounds of Schuylkill Action student projects. We grouped a few projects together, but only took on the first step of the project in this funding round. This grant was for outreach to schools and the creation of plans. So we already have another grant lined up for the green stormwater implementation at one of these schools. Because the plans are already completed, it will be a lot easier for us to apply more quickly and more efficiently when we see other funding opportunities come up for other schools that we already have the plans ready for. One of the most notable changes with this round of funding was our use of partners for school outreach. Schuylkill Action students had been on hiatus for several years, and after the pandemic, SAN lost several of its connections to local schools. For the greatest outreach, we decided to rely on partner organizations, which were Montgomery County Conservation District, Berks Nature, and Green Valley's Watershed Association. They all work with schools more regularly than SAN does, and they were able to help us garner interest from schools. And pictured here, I have over on that side there is a Phoenixville Middle School bioswale planting. And then this is that same bioswale a year later, after the plants had had a chance to flesh out a little bit. And now, before I pass the microphone on, does anyone have questions about the back end of the grant or about Schuylkill Action Network? Wonderful. Then I'm going to pass over to my colleague.
Hi, I'm Marguerite DiGiorgio. So, after our amazing partners reached out, we received 7 applications for this program from Montgomery School, Kimberton Waldorf School, Evergreen Elementary, North Penn High School, Norristown Area High School, Perkiomen Valley School District, and Abington Senior High School. To select the schools that we're going to move forward with for this project, we used EMAP PA, which is a great tool if you haven't had the opportunity to use it. It's got a bunch of amazing filters that you can use to identify different projects. Specifically, we used it to look at proximity to a water body, the impairment status of that water body, and the emotional environmental burden carried by the local community. And then the schools that we ended up moving forward with based on those factors were Kimberton Waldorf, Montgomery School, Evergreen Elementary, and Norristown High School, as you will see. And then in that chart, you can see that the Schuylkill River watershed is highlighted in light blue, and the schools are the little stars.
So that's where I get to come in and do more of the on the ground work. So once the schools have been identified, then my consulting firm came in and we start initially with a desktop investigation just to kind of understand the area. We start with a little bit of GIS research. If you're not familiar, ArcGIS Pro is a great mapping source. So we start there and then we get a little bit of an understanding of the area, and then we get out in the field and really collect all the data that's necessary to develop something that's impactful for each and every school. Now, all of those are very different and they will all vary based on the actual site conditions and what all of these schools deal with on a day-to-day basis. So nearby structures are also noted, and we need to be able to design around what's existing, and then that includes taking lots of measurements. When then we have all of that data, we take it back to the office, and then we can start working on a conceptual drawing, which is what we did for all 4 of these selected schools. Every school got a conceptual. So like I was saying, with the desktop and GIS data review, we really start with looking at data from all areas, just to kind of get a full, well-rounded picture. So from looking at each municipality's available GIS data, and then branching up to the county data that's available, and then using Pennsylvania Spatial Data Access, or PASDA, as a great resource because there's tons of information there. And then since these are all green infrastructure related designs, really understanding the soil is very important. So we pulled web soil surveys for each 4 sites just to make sure who's got good infiltration and who doesn't. So we kind of look for streams, wetlands, contours, nearby roadways, parcel data, all to kind of put on a map and visualize. So you can see here on this example that I have, this is a map that gets sent out to surveyors so they can understand. In that dark purple is the surveyed area or the project area, and then the hatched on top is the survey area. Just so I need to know what's there, what's not there, what can I put there. And you can see some of them have closer proximity to the buildings, so that's also taken into account when building any rain gardens or structures in those areas. And then, like I said, I've got the parcel datas on there as well. So in the red little hatched area, well, not hatched, but that little red dot lines, that's the, the site parcel. So having that identified helps their life, helps my life, and it's great. And then we have streets, just so everybody knows where everything's at. So, like I said, step 2, we gotta really understand. There's only so much you can do from looking at a computer. So we get out in the site. On the left photo, with the lovely snow, that's one of the sites, and you could see that there's that huge incline going right into the project area. So making sure you're taking note of things like that. You know, like we know we're gonna have a ton of runoff coming from that hill above us. You know, that's probably contributing to the fact that there's ponding on the baseball field, you know. So taking note of where the water is, where is it moving, and how it's moving is really important in understanding a certain site. So on the right, I know it's kind of hard to tell, so bear with me, but in the middle, so you could see the people on the other side, that's the right bank of a stream. And then the photo is taken from the left bank of a stream. It's kind of dried up because when we went, it was very hot and very dry. But this site had a particular issue with children crossing over the stream. So as you can imagine, if you're a parent, you definitely don't really want your kid jumping across a river to go play on the playground. But they were doing it. So there's a lot of heavily eroded area there. And you can tell it's completely bare. Absolutely no bank cover there in that section. So where you can see upstream, downstream, nice and green and full. Does anyone have any questions about that so far? No? Good? Yes. No. It depends on the location. So it really depends on the funding of the municipality. So some municipalities have a lot of GIS data readily available online. Some will make you pay for it, and then some just don't have any data at all. So it's really kind of a shot in the dark on who you're dealing with. Yes.
Like that back slope, you were saying there's a lot of overland flow. For part of your GIS review, did you utilize like flow accumulation or like topographic data?
Yeah, I pulled contour data, but I didn't necessarily pull any flow data for a 2D model at this stage because the site with the river wasn't selected to go any further. We just designed like a basic conceptual, so we weren't looking at anything beyond that at that point. But if it had continued further, then it would have gotten like a 2D model and flow data. Yeah. Anybody else? Good. Okay. And then these are 2 other sites. So the left site, you know, learning about what's in the existing area is important to where you're building, what can you build. So what you can see, hopefully, is a little teeny tiny shed, and then there's a bunch of plant material you can see. Those are all planter boxes. So this was a high school site, and they had an existing gardening area that the students were using for an outside club. So their goal was to try and kind of boost use of this. It wasn't really fully used, and they wanted to get more of a educational standpoint connected to it. So what we were looking at here was, you know, keeping in this general area. There's a lot of ponding in that area, and these planter boxes are just kind of like sitting almost, you know, not to their full potential. So we were planning on putting a rain garden nearby, and then some rain barrels on the nearby sheds as well. You know, use what you have, you know. So it was a great spot to put in some rain barrels, which are going to be connected by roof leaders. So just connecting and collecting water that they're already getting is, you know, half the battle. And then the photo on the right, this school had like a million different storm drains and roof leaders that were going directly into the ground, which poses a few issues when you're trying to dig, right? So they didn't have really good mapping about where are these roof leaders going and what are they connecting into, but we could find, you know, I can tell where the pipes are pointing within the storm drains and kind of make an educated guess from there, obviously before digging using, you know, PA1 call. Always do that. So you got to know what you're working with to get a full picture before you can really design. And again, it's still caveated because once you get a full survey done, that can change final placement. Okay, so then that brings us in to our initial conceptual designs for each school. So the school that I was just referring to with all of the drains is this school up here. So I know the colors are kind of light for this purpose, but bear with me here. So the green hatched areas are all of the proposed rain gardens that we had for this area. And you can see the blue little dots are catch basins. Can we see those okay? Good. Okay. So there's a million of them there, but this site has virtually no green space but grass. Pretty minor tree cover, and that was really it. So, and this is an elementary school, and they really wanted to kind of get the kids outside more. They have this great, beautiful playground area, but it's all pavement, you know? They wanted something a little bit more hands-on and educational. So that's where these rain gardens come in. Educational signage would be a great little boost for that area. And then one of the teachers wanted to install potentially a garden. So you can see that yellow triangle is another area where we had marked off for a potential vegetable garden area for the children to learn more about, you know, being in the environment. What is soil? What does it do? And then the little tiny red squares are they're proposed rain barrels. So we were trying to look at how can we make this more sustainable for the school so we're not introducing a huge cost for them to have to maintain. So we add in the rain barrels, one less thing to worry about, they already have water. And then that way they can just carry their cute little waterings, you know, over there and water their little garden, all of these small little children, and it makes it much easier. Now, like I was saying, this site full of roof leaders. So the tiny little pink dots are every single roof leader that we saw visible that goes directly into the ground and connects to mystery pipes. So there was a lot to think about for this one, and not like, you know, not a lot of unusable space. So then you can see that blue hatched area, great spot, right? So we were thinking about putting an infiltration basin in that curved L shape to try and capture all of that runoff coming from that parking lot, and introducing some curb cuts and some under drain pipes to kind of self-feed it. Does anyone have any questions about that? I just said a lot of words. Yes?
What is a catch basin exactly?
Catch basins are the things on the side of the street that are like little grates, and so like the water just like runs into them. But depending on your municipality, it really depends on how well maintained they are. Sometimes you get a bunch of leaves, like in a heavy rainstorm, they could get covered by leaves, and then you've got backed up water on your road. So they have plenty of them to maintain, you know, that kind of area, but you have to worry about what's like the roof leader situation. Like, are the roof leaders going into those pipes or are they not?
Just gutters that come off the buildings?
Correct, yeah, and like, so sometimes people have them where they're just like free flowing into the grass, and some people have them where they're buried. This situation, they had them buried to where we could tell at one point that they were connected to another row of pipes, but we were not specifically able, they were PVC, so we weren't really sure. Are they connected to the catch basins or are they separate? Anyways, yes.
On that same topic, with some like new developments, they can ask a municipality to install like a new catch basin for them to install green stormwater infrastructure on top of.
Yeah.
Considering you're doing projects on already built structures, are you working with just existing catch basins and trying to understand it that way?
Correct, yeah, so we're just looking to avoid them at this point, because the area gets a pretty good amount of water, so we're not going to connect into any existing pipes, but it's more so just like informational, just so that we know, you know, what not to dig into. Gotcha. Yeah.
On that same topic, do you ever struggle with like shortcomings of not having enough basins to work with, or not having like site-specific parameters that work?
Yeah, in other sites that I've worked on, there's definitely a, you know, sometimes it's very limited. And you have like one and it's, 3 blocks up the street and it's not the same elevation grade as your current area and all the water's pitching into your property. So then you have to get a little creative and think, okay, how am I gonna store my own water because it's not gonna go anywhere else? So sometimes it does happen, it really just is the luck of the draw. So anyway, good. I'm gonna move to our next site. Again, a little hard to see, so there's a lot of lines on this one. So this site had a few issues. This was the site that I was talking to you about with the stream and the crossing and the children. When I say children, I really mean like 4-year-olds trekking through like the mud, right? Yep. Marguerite knows what I'm talking about. We were there. It was very interesting to see. And it's a very shallow stream. There was literally nothing in it when we were there. It was more of just I took one step over it. But when peak flows are high and you're getting a lot of rain, it's muddy. So for this site, we were proposing throwing in a bridge crossing so that the kids have a safe access across. And to solve the issue of all of the dry, barren banks, we thought, let's do some very nice plantings. So we were thinking doing like a nice riparian planting area on either side and also trying to solve it with some green infrastructure live staking right into the bank. If anyone's familiar with stream restoration work, a good tool for non-structured restoration is using live stakes. So that was a component we were looking to use at this site as well. And then you can see that nice green shaded area is another rain garden that we were just kind of throwing in for fun. This site, you can see the stream is in that very light, almost white bluish color. They had a lot of grass. It's just a lot of grass. There's not really much soaking any of that water up when the stream does overflow. And so having a little rain garden there can help capture that extra water and, make something beautiful and good for nature. Nice pollinator area. Did anyone have any questions about that one? Sorry, I jumped quick. Yes?
That blue line's this screen.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, was it an intermittent channel or was it perennial?
I think it was a perennial, but, sometimes there's good data on that and sometimes there's not. So it was more of a, okay, should be here and it's not kind of thing. So it was also a very dry year. And they said that typically, because when we went out to all of these sites, it's very important for us to understand, not just by looking at it, I'm only there one day, asking the administrators and the teachers, what is your biggest problem is half the battle in understanding the area. And they said that it's usually always flowing, but, they contradict sometimes, so it depends. Anybody else? Good? Okay. So this is another site with all the snow that I showed you earlier. This site had a few issues. So we were proposing just a bunch of rain gardens here because, again, all grass, literally nothing but grass. And they had, I don't know how well you can see it, but all the way on the top road of this, of that parking area. Here, let's do this laser pointer. Can you see up here? See that darkened area? That's actually a wet spot from water that's just been filling up in that grass area and just pouring itself out into their little driving road over there for the parking area. So it's also directly next to the playground that they have for the smaller kids. So again, how can we solve that issue? So we put in 2 different rain garden sizes to try and capture some of that stormwater, and then put in another one on the opposite end to kind of just pull everything away from that edge. And then you can see down here, we have another rain garden here. And that's because there was more of that ponding water on their walkway, which you can see here. There's an existing rain garden here, which is still establishing. So it's not pulling in as much as it could for this area. So we also had proposed some porous pavement in that black hatched area to kind of really drive it home. And now these conceptuals are just about putting in a bunch of different things that we could do to improve the area, not necessarily what's gonna be final, which we'll get to that later. And then there was one other rain garden proposed, which you can't see on this sheet, but they have this big soccer field, and around the edge of the soccer field is all of these wonderful inclines. So all of the rain and runoff is pouring directly into this soccer field that they use all the time. So we're proposing a nice little like L-shaped rain garden to capture that like edged issue, and some extra plantings on the top because a lot of the trees in that area are all dead. So they need cut and replaced with something that's gonna actually drink up that water. Anything else on this? Yes.
You mentioned the permeable pavement.
Yes.
I've heard that like you have to have permeable pavement like vacuumed every now and then, or it just kind of fills up with sediment.
Yeah.
How do you kind of approach that?
Well, so all of these projects, with whatever would be like taken to the next step, would get a maintenance manual. So we're not just like putting anything in and being like, good luck. Like there'd be like steps and directions within that maintenance manual for people to get an idea of how they can, you know, keep it working long term. But again, it comes down to like cost, right? Like how can you actually make sure that you're going to be able to have that kind of budget? So that's something that the schools would need to play around with and potentially like more grant funding. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. And this brings us to our final school. This one there's a beautiful stream on the left. You can see it's like that light bluish aqua color. Maybe it's kind of hard to tell with the trees, but you can see it kind of like there's a great riparian forested area existing already right there. However, they still get a lot of water. It's just wet. And they've got this ginormous parking area, which I'm sure you're all staring at like, oh my gosh, what a crazy parking area for this school. It's huge. We've been there. It's like the amount of parking is just remarkable, really. Right? It was a lot of parking. So this is the parking for like their bus area. And they don't really use buses. They have minivans. Who knew? That's pretty cool. So they had some existing sheds, which you can see in these little like pink outlines. Oh, let me use my correct hand. So there's one right here, and then there's one over here. And you see there's like extra water, this little like dark spot again. We've got more water just ponding, you know, so the whole this specific parking area is just pitched back towards this entire like track and field area. And all the water is just kind of like collecting here. So to kind of settle that a little bit, you can see that we have this one rain garden here, and then we have it under drained and piped out into the stream for any extra water that would definitely flow into it. Back when I was talking to you about site investigation, this specific site has bad infiltration. It's just not great for water. So these rain gardens would get filled with organic material, and then that would help it, you know, infiltrate much better. But in effort to save the plants, it would be piped out, any excess water. So there's that. And then these two orange areas are proposed planting, like tree planting areas, to kind of give the area a little more tree cover. There's like only those trees, that forested area right around the stream, and then there's like nothing but grass again for days and days and days. And then the yellow area here is just an extension, just trying to build out that riparian buffer zone, just kind of give that stream, because it connects like all the way around on this side as well. So they're double. And then there's land in the middle. So in effort to kind of clear that all up, we put that in there. And then each little shed gets 2 rain barrels, which would be connected into those roof leaders that are already existing. Don't, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We can just pull water right from where it's coming. And then you can see these 2, might be hard to tell, but there's 2 little like brown spots. Those are potential curb cuts. So since the parking area is already like pitched back towards us, in order to just kind of infiltrate our own water without having to do anything, we're just gonna curb cut those curbs, and the water's just gonna flow right into our beautiful rain garden, and we're gonna have no problems. And then that under drain, any excess water we get, goes right back out to the stream, filtered and everything. So this one has a lot of different things. And like I was talking to you about earlier, this is the site that had that existing garden area. So you can see this little like block, they had all of those raised planter beds. So the rain barrels help them because they can actually feed their own gardens with the, the rain that they're getting from the area anyway. So any questions on that final one? Yes.
Did you have any problems with DEP, like getting a permit with that piping back into the stream?
We haven't gone to permits yet, so we just did the full phase of design for these. So that would be a conversation for the conservation district and and DEP, but that would also be dependent on how much we're going to actually end up digging up in that area. I believe it's probably like 18 inches of depth, so that would be a regulator question for sure, but it's such a small footprint also, so sometimes they don't really care about the teensy tiny ones. Anybody else? Good, okay.
Thank you. So jumping back to the grant requirement part of this, for the grant that we currently have through Pennsylvania Coastal Zone Management, we have some pretty hefty guardrails in place. So our goal is just to create these design plans right now. And then as a phase 2, we have funding from Constellation to implement one of these projects. So when we're looking at these 4 different schools with a multitude of projects on each campus, we are looking at which ones we want to have fully designed. As a part of our first grant, we are going to have 1 project that is fully engineered, and then 2 more that are almost all the way there. They'll have the designs done, they just won't have that final step of surveying done. And if we decide to move forward with those 2 projects going forward, we'll just have an updated survey when we have the funding available for that, and then roll that into the implementation funding. So right now we are in the process of looking at the various projects available, and we have decided which one will be our first choice project. Now, while we were deciding that, we were looking at a variety of different factors. Our goal was to find a green stormwater infrastructure project that would have the greatest effect on stormwater while still remaining within the budget that we know we have for this second round of Constellation funding that is sitting there ready to go whenever we're ready to start. Putting in rain gardens in the very first school we looked at, the elementary school, fit those needs really nicely. It was also important for the students to be involved in the project, so we gave preference to schools who had a plan in place for student participation and had the capacity for maintenance going forward. That elementary school that we showed that had the idea for the vegetable garden and a variety of rain gardens, they came to us and said, we want the students to be involved. We have ideas for a gardening club. We want to make this gardening a part of our science classes. So that was one of the main factors we looked at to help us decide that that was the one that we wanted to be our first choice project. And then my photos here, this is photos of quite a large rain garden, an 800 square foot rain garden. And then over here we have during the planting student participation, and this was Robeson Elementary School several years ago. Any questions about the grants? They're the straightforward part of this.
Thank you so much. Please shuffle down. Thank you so much. Thank you. So then that brings us to our final you know, we did all that work. We have our 4 conceptuals, but now we know which ones we're moving forward with. So like Allison said, we have one final one that's going to be getting a survey, and then there'll be 2 others that will have their, you know, their design. They just won't have the survey portion of that. So keep that in mind. So when we talk rain gardens, so all of the sites that we're going to be designing for, we moved forward with the rain garden options. They make the most fiscal amount of sense, and they fit in perfectly with what all of the schools are kind of looking for. So these are just like a kind of list that we look at planting in rain gardens in these specific areas. So all of the sites had issues with ponding, aside from like literally one school. And then they had no green spaces. So to address that, we have the rain gardens as the best option to absorb up all that water and kind of create a nice pollinator area. Because it's just, half of it isn't just fixing that issue. It's also about bringing something back to the environment and saying like, okay, this is going to help the entire ecosystem. We're not just dealing with more grass. So the rain gardens, like we said, will also serve as outdoor living classroom examples for these kids, and then we'll have signage and everything. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with installation of rain gardens, but all of the plants will get laid out in a certain way so that they're absorbing moisture at different levels. So some plants absorb more water than others. So the ones that absorb less will be on the exterior like border area. And then as we get deeper, we'll get more of those plants that just want more water and are more like wetland-like. And like I kind of touched on earlier, infiltration is totally key at all of these areas, right? Like you could plant as much as you want, but if you're not going to infiltrate, then your poor little plants are just going to get, you know, flooded out. So making sure that you have good soil in that area is very, very helpful. And then they'll also get plants, but they'll also get seeded too, so that there's any gaps that are getting filled in with a native rain garden mix. So native plants are literally the only thing you should be planting in a rain garden. I feel like I just need to say that, you know, I'm sure everyone knows that, but I'm going to verbally say that out loud, just in case anyone doesn't know that. Any questions on that? Yes?
Earlier, I remember you mentioning like USDA, like soil survey.
Correct.
Are you gonna do like test pits and field verifications to determine like drainage class?
That's a great question. As of right now, we don't have, like we were just doing the conceptual, so we didn't do any infiltration testing, but we just used that web soil survey as our guiding line for that, which is why they'll get, I'll show you in my next slide, I'll show you the breakdown of the rain garden area. That's why each of them will get an organic layer of soil that we bring in. So just to make sure that they're all gonna be infiltrated the right way, because some of them have less infiltration areas than others, but good question, yeah.
I'm always curious with areas that are really developed because like grading practice, sometimes they're actually in the fill material.
Yeah.
And the mapping was done before that was actually developed. So
Yeah.
sometimes in really developed sites you'll think.
Yeah, you'll see it. I'll show you the whole thing. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay. So these are the 3 sites that we moved forward with. These are great photos. As you can tell, it was winter. So these are the 3 sites that will get like engineered design. So this is the first school that I showed you. This is one area where a rain garden will be placed. It will obviously be 10 feet from the school. I don't want any issues with that. But so these are just like areas to kind of show you like this is flat ground. This is an area where, you know, runoff is happening and there's, again, like nothing there. You could see this one dead tree because it was winter. But I mean, you know, there's trees there, but that's really like it, you know? And then this is the soccer field I was telling you about. And you can kind of see it. You see that back there, this like dark snow? And then this lovely area. These are my footprints. So I was doing a little test, as you do, and I sunk about 6 inches into the mud underneath the snow. So that's just like kind of a guiding rule for you. Like that's how much water is just sitting there. And then you can see it a little bit better. These are those lovely hills I was telling you about where the runoff is just falling right in there. And then we've got some great dead trees that are more on this left side. But you know, that's what we're working with on that one. So, and then the last slide, well, not last slide, but the last picture. This is where that other rain garden will be, where the schools have the existing garden beds already. So this is kind of like in front of them. And then those curb cuts will be right where these giant mounds of snow are. They're like 6 feet tall, in case anyone was curious. It was crazy. And then you can see in the background the little fleet of vans for school to leave. And then, and it was also very wet in that site. And there was a mystery ditch in the middle with lots of water, which, again, you can be out to a site multiple times. This is our second site visit and our first time seeing the mystery ditch. That doesn't show up on literally anything or the PA1 call we did. It's just a ditch full of water in the middle of their little planting area for some reason. So that's what they look like pre-development. So like we said, like right now, we're just getting these into full design, still getting into the implementation stage. Wow, tongue twister. Yes. No, you.
Did you have any concerns about salt runoff from the parking lot coming through those curb cuts?
Oh, yeah. There'll probably be like a little filter. You know, that's really about all you can do is hope. You know, anybody else? Yes.
You mentioned that the rain garden is going to be 10 feet from the building.
Yes, this first one.
Why does that be 10 feet from the building?
We just like to make sure that we're a good distance away in case there's any like loose wiring or any like root growth, because the idea is that these are going to be here for a really long time and they're going to expand a little bit. So you want to give like a little buffer for yourself just in case, you know, one year they did really good and they moved 2 feet over. You know, you don't want to be brushing up against, just for long-term maintenance and, you know, you don't want to affect any structure. So that's really why. Yes?
Regarding maintenance.
Yes.
Who is responsible for that? Because I can see the maintenance people who work for the school really pushing back. Like, we just like to mow.
Well, so that's a great point. So I don't know if Allison might have more points on this, but we did speak to a lot of the maintenance workers and they were all very excited about having something more to do than mow, because a lot of them are just, you know, snow removal and, you know, the occasional stuff, but I know that might be in another grant phase, for all I know.
Yes, so as far as the maintenance goes, that's part of the reason why we wanted the school participation part and the plan for the school to use the gardens going forward, whether it's a demonstration garden or a part of a gardening club or an AP environmental science class. If they have something like that in place, then most likely the maintenance will be spread across those variety of clubs and people for the long term. But as Sam mentioned, we did talk to the maintenance staff at the schools along the way to make sure they were on board and they were okay with what was going to be happening if their site was selected.
And in addition, they gave a lot of input on what features would be helpful and which ones weren't. I remember we toured one school and we were talking about putting in a rain garden in a specific area, and they were like, absolutely not. We need to have that area for graduation and things of that nature. So we were interfacing with them pretty early in the process, and a lot of times the maintenance people were the ones who were showing us the sites. And so we were talking to them in the earliest stages of this conceptual planning.
Like our first site visit was a year ago. I think we started this process last March. So when we went out, you know, that's part of the question, because a lot of people bring out your, you know, your faculty members, your superintendent. I'm like, this is great, and I know you have answers, I'm sure, but where's your maintenance person? When I go, I do a lot of other jobs, and it's usually the maintenance person that we ask the question first to, because they're gonna know the answer. But great point. Anybody else? Good, okay. And this is that slide I was telling you about in the back. It's got that, it might be kind of hard to read, but so you can see that the elevation is important. So the elevation numbers that are on this one specifically are just one example from one site. So obviously they'll vary a little bit in elevation and depth. final elevations based on whichever site, you know, they're all different. So you can see that this is the school that I was telling you about that has the under drain feature. So you could see like this is the little top part of it. And then this is the under drain that's gonna go out into an outlet. But you see we have the regular native soils here where that under drain would be. And then we're gonna fill it with just like organic material. So composted organic material that will, you know, we have a percentage. I don't have the percentage on me, don't quiz me, but there is like a specific spec that we look to for that. And then on top, it'll be mulched. So those plants will just come right up through the mulch and all that goodness. But we look for them to have like a 3 height to 1 vertical on the sides. You want a little bit of sloping there just to kind of pour that water in. And then these are the 3 sites that we moved forward with to get that engineered aspect. So you can see like these are their names, and then this is the square footage size of each rain garden, and then with the amount of drainage area that they'll be drinking up. So like the first one, 17,000 square feet. Now that one, you're like, whoa, that's a big one, right? That's 3 different ones combined. I didn't separate them, sorry. And then they serve a drainage area of 3 acres. So that's what they'll be drinking up. And then they're all like roughly 18 inches deep. So they're not like too deep into the ground. And then we just layer them like that. Any questions? No? Good? Okay. And I talked to you about a little bit of some sites had rain barrels, right? So these rain barrels are just the 50-gallon ones. Nothing too big. Nothing needs to be bigger than that. And these, like we were talking about maintenance, the $1 million question, these just get maintained like every 3 months. Barrel gets cleaned out. Any blockages get removed. And all of the schools have existing gutter systems. So we're not adding anything new, really. We're just kind of sticking that there, and they can use it at their own free will. This is a little graphic just for your viewing. And then of course the spigot will be on the bottom, so you could fill up your little you know, watering device if need be, and then, you know, or a hose if you feel like it. And then we have the 2 sites that have these connected, the proposed, and it's a great sustainable water source. So the places that want to garden, you know, they really just have to worry about their seeds, their mulch, their soil, and all that jazz, and then they have water already, you know. Any questions on that? Yes.
What happens, like in the summer when no one's there and you got a really heavy rain? Do you have those diverter systems in that when they leave they can, close it up so that the water goes to the existing drainage thing that takes it the way it used to take it out?
Yeah, they totally could. I mean, it really depends. Some schools have maintenance there year round. It really just depends. Like some of these schools are, one of them's a private school, and they do like year-round things. So it really is like very dependent on each school. But yeah, they could just take it out, you know, take it down for the season.
No, I mean, no, there's actually a downspout system where.
Right, you can change the.
Yeah. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, we didn't like specifically like plan those out for them. It's more of like we just put them on the drawing for right now. But that's a great point. Any more questions? No. All right. And that's our talk.
I would like to add just one last thing about the timeline of where we are with this project. So as we've said a couple times now, we are at the final stage of doing the planning part of it, and we have notified the schools that are our grand winners, that they are the ones who are getting the fully engineered designs or the partially engineered designs, and that will end at the end of April. And then after that, we will move forward with our first choice school, and we are hoping to start implementation possibly late this summer, early in the fall, or depending on what is going to be planted, we may wait until next spring. At that point in time, we will start looking for funding opportunities for the implementation for the other 2 schools that have partially engineered designs, and we'll kind of start the whole process over again with trying to find a new round of schools. Most likely we will be pulling from the list of applicants who applied to this first round but didn't make it to the design stage, and we'll go from there and hopefully continue this in perpetuity as long as there's funding available and interest from schools, of course. But thank you all. We do have a couple of minutes, so any questions about any part of the process?
I have another question. I guess the Pennsylvania teachers are familiar with the new steels, science, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, and one of the embedded things in each grade 4, 5 through 8, and 9 through 12 is this meaningful watershed experience where the students are supposed to come up with, the teacher basically takes them outside, and it doesn't have to be outside, it could be in the building, and the students come up with a problem, or they see a situation that's concerning, and then they come up with it. Are any schools that you're aware of, are they tapping into, like, the kids' concern? It kind of sounded like it's more like the school's idea, and that's okay, but this is kind of where they were going with this, it's called a MeWe, Meaningful Educational Experience. So I was just kind of curious how that's maybe starting to filter in now when grants are written. I mean, it's a lot on the teacher, because you really have to, like, work with the kids, listen to what the kids have to say and all that, and that's a lot of work. I just wondered how that's fitting in with everything.
So the question was primarily about the Meaningful Watershed Education Experiences, or MeWEs, and if we are right now rolling that into the process. As of right now, at least for the 3 schools that we've chosen and the 4 schools that we've been working with on this round, MeWEs have not been a part of it. However, as we see different funding opportunities come up, if we have teachers who will buy in to work with us and want to pursue a MeWE on their campus, and we have the funding that would be in place for that to happen, because typically a MeWE does involve an on-water experience, and that can be quite pricey for schools. So it requires buy-in from multiple avenues there. That is something that we would consider working on in the future. It just depends on whether or not the pieces will fall into place.
I was just curious, thank you.
Yes, just one word, your question kind of gave me a thought. Our watershed stewards group put downspout planters at 2 different schools and where I used to work, and in the city of Reading. And of course, you have to drill a hole through those very expensive downspouts. It looked like the rain barrels you have to cut off and install the rain barrel connection.
Yeah.
How do the schools feel about that?
Well, so the positive for us is the one school that has like 1 million of them, they're like totally fine. They were the most excited about the possibility of doing all of these things, and they had a lot of big ideas. They came to us with a lot of ideas. And so when we said, well, we could do rain barrels, they were like, great. So we haven't had like an issue with that. And then the other site that has the rain barrels, there's 4 of them at 2 different sheds. Those sheds don't have any down roof leaders. So they just have like the top ones, like the gutters that are just kind of sitting there doing nothing. So all we have to do really is just plug one right in. So it's less of a big investment because those ones are very small, but that would have been an issue in another situation, I'm sure.
I know where the school that we were working with, the superintendent was all about it.
Yeah.
The school was all about it.
Yeah.
And then I had to work with the building and grounds manager, it's like, you're gonna do what?
Yeah, luckily we had talked to all of the maintenance crews on both of those schools, and they were like, yeah, okay. And then the teachers, we had 2 teachers that were very passionate on each of these schools. And so they were really just like spearheading communication basically. So it was pretty simple for us on that end. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
So I know you said at the beginning that you kind of have like an application process for schools to engage. And I know you said you work with maintenance a lot, but who is it that you like contact first at the schools to get the word out or to find out if the school's interested?
Sorry, passing back and forth a little bit because we did different components of this. But a lot of times the first person that we would connect with would be a teacher. Through our partners, they have, like, a lot of times they do in-classroom work or they have other connections. So typically it is like a teacher that we make the connection with, and then through that teacher they like share our information with their administration, and the administration gets us to the maintenance people. So it's kind of like a web in the school, but a lot of times it is the like passionate teacher that is kind of driving the whole effort.
Anything else? No? All right, well, we're all set.
I would like to add on that was also the part of this that we relied heavily on our partners for. They had the connections in the schools, so they knew people who they've been working with already, and that's a big part of where we started.
Great. Thank you very much.